Welcome to New Millennial Kingdom, where Jesus Christ is Lord. Bulletin 6 is a compilation of information concerning major Earth changes coming upon the Earth due to activities and instabilities around the Earth core. This information given to us by the Melchizedek Corps. Bulletin 6 was released on November 15, 2019. Please find a link in the description box. Title begins with the word Urantia. That is the Earth's name in the universe. The Earth, also pronounced Urantia. It is planet 606 in the local system. Now title, Urantia. Melchizedeks prepare emergency list as geological conditions ripen to buckle continents. Broadcast by the Federated Melchizedek Corps based on Solvington. Now Solvington is the capital of our local universe called Nebadon. Our Creator's Son, our Creator Father's name is Michael of Nebadon, who had his 7 bestowal mission in the person of Jesus Christ. And because his name is now associated with Urantia, he also known as Christ Michael in the universe. Now back to the bulletin. I want you to clearly understand that this prediction is covering a timeline of 30, 60, 100 years. So don't you think that this will all happen right now? I'm going to read up front the places which will be discussed in this bulletin or in this segment of the bulletin. 1. Northeast coast of Washington State down to eastern Oregon and mid-state. 2. All of California and into the western portions of the country of Mexico. 3. Northeast United States from the mid-Atlantic state of Pennsylvania to Maine and southern Canada including Prince Edward Island. 4. Nebraska, Chicago, Kansas, and westward to Colorado. 5. Finally, for the United States, that's an overview of the whole nation. And with that, I will stop the recording, finishing with the United States, and start part 2 with number 6 point, which is Ontario, Canada, and Quebec City. And now comes
Bulletin 6. November 15, 2019. York, Pennsylvania. The Magisterial Foundation. Urantia, Melchizedeks prepare emergency list as geological conditions ripen to buckle continents. Page 1. Urantia has reached the age it must undergo continental sinking again, and that is as it did at one point in our evolution about 350 million years ago. We understand what keeps a land mass called a continent up and dry from the always encroaching oceans. It is this: the continental pressure at ocean bottom levels is about 20,000 pounds to the square inch. That is, this would be the pressure of a continental mass standing 15,000 feet above the ocean floor. The ocean floor water pressure is only about 5,000 pounds to the square inch. These differential pressures tend to cause the continents to slide toward the ocean beds. See paper 58, Urantia text. November 15, 2019. Broadcast by the Federated Melchizedek Corp based on Salvington. 1. Northeast coast of Washington State down to eastern Oregon about mid-state. Inundation to approximate mid-state Washington and Oregon. California is in a different category entirely. Page 2. 2. All of California and into the western portions of the country of Mexico. Inundation for 80 miles into southwestern portions of Mexico City. Mexico City's more northern portions may survive easily, as that depends on the plate beneath that city and then how that volcano nearby acts when the magma chamber is ruptured. Inundation in California to the central portions of the state, with the fault lines of the deep trench running up the San Joaquin Valley to completely fill it. Inundation of the Baja of Mexico, and as such it will never emerge again as its spine is likely to collapse. Inundation of the southwest U.S. border from Baja to central New Mexico to a depth of 1,700 feet, and this is due to the collapse entirely of the submerged barrier reef about 400 million years ago when New Mexico area appeared as it is seen today. The Colorado River ran from southern Montana through to Colorado. It then turned east at what is today is called Grand Fork, New Mexico to the east to south of Austin, Texas. The earthquake that forced the Colorado to flow west to its outlet into the ocean in Southern California, shook the Indian population for 6 straight days, never once stopping the shaking of the land they lived on. The Comanche Indians still speak of the history of their people to include the talk about the land becoming water almost and how it climbed the canyon walls during that earthquake, which also reshaped how much Mexico itself became dependent on water from the Colorado too. Page 3. Louisiana and New Orleans. Inundation of Louisiana and portions of western Mississippi. Details obscure due to the fact that the Gulf of Mexico sits on 7 tectonic plates and all are in severe erosion due to blasting for well drilling far too deep and too often for safety's sake. Inundation of New Orleans probable to a department of about 600 feet. 3. Northeast United States from the mid-Atlantic state of PA to Maine and southern Canada including Prince Edward Island. The United States was founded on the 13 colonies mostly located, in the northeastern part of what is now the United States. These northeast states will suffer least but have high-resolution damage on their Atlantic coastlines. Maine will suffer the least and the border state of Maryland, the most. The entire coastline from Bangor, Maine down to Virginia Beach is likely to subside to a department of 600 to 5,000 feet depending where the continental shelf crumbles into the Atlantic Trench. That trench is over 6 billion years old and is what remains of the original formation of the planet Urantia. It has never been erased by geologic changes, and only the ice shelf of 6,000 years ago was strong enough in motion and weight to dislodge some of it near what today is Boston. Page 4. Pennsylvania will suffer the inundation of Philadelphia, and while the entire Delaware coastline will flood over its head, and take away most of what today is the state of Delaware. The Chesapeake Bay will fill up as its lowermost layers will subside at least 50 feet or more. That subsiding happens under Baltimore, too, and cover Baltimore Harbor with the rest of the city eventually. The depth will be, when finally seen, to 1,600 feet at least. It is probable that the entire midsection of the state of Maryland could be inundated up to the doorstep of Hagerstown or slightly more east than that. Washington, D.C. and to move the U.S. capital. All plans and means to escape this will entail the removal of the United States Capitol inland by about 60 or 70 miles, and we doubt any of the marble monuments can be moved out of Washington, D.C., including the Jefferson Memorial and the Lincoln Memorial, so beautiful yet to this day. The Potomac mouth itself is likely to go under for about 1,600 feet of the Atlantic Ocean at the very least, as it sits on so much mud which washed downstream the tectonic plate beneath the estuary is likely to collapse with tons of more ocean water on top of it. Still, it is very hard to predict what or where this tectonic plate will crack, if at all. If stayed up, Washington, D.C. would have time to moor the marble buildings all associated with this nation's capital. Page 5. 4. Nebraska, Chicago, Kansas, and westward to Colorado. This is a questionable area due to the fact that the tectonic plates beneath the Great Plains, Chicago, and the Dakotas, are worn but resilient. A new Great Lake will form on the southern border of the city of Chicago. That eventually drains south to the prevailing waters of the Gulf of Mexico. It is also questionable just how far the Gulf water encroach up the Mississippi Valley. That is not easily guessed at, and those waters may stop at the northern Missouri River outlet, as indications are that a more southerly route of the Gulf water may inundate Pittsburgh rather going directly north to Chicago or the Dakotas. The Great Lakes. The Great Lakes are in trouble. They currently drain via the St. Lawrence River through the Eisenhower Locks, but those locks will easily be destroyed when the St. Lawrence River exceeds flood tide from the Atlantic and that ocean forces itself into Lake Ontario, the whole way back to water beneath Niagara Falls. It may go so far as Lake Ontario will be filled to the brim as the ocean will fill to the top of that escarpment and flush its waters up Lake Huron, to force Lake Erie to flow south back toward Pittsburgh through a gracious stream now called the Monongahela. None of this is fully predictable, but even worse could happen if the Atlantic flows westward up the Pennsylvania, Susquehanna River just east of York, Pennsylvania. That could inundate everything just east of York, but York itself is too far inland to take the Atlantic into its streets. Page 6. Lake Huron is the most stable of the Great Lakes today. Lake Michigan is a terrible master of itself and is likely to slop over if pushed even just a little bit. Lake Superior is too deep and without much mud at all due to a constant washing of the bottom with vast currents of water emerging out of an underground aquire that is fed by Lake Nipigon, and even others. For some reason this has never been discovered by the mariners of that area. 5. Finally, for the United States. In general, the United States will lose about 60% of its arable land, and about 23% of its sovereign land territory. Canada will lose almost all of the northern territories. That is when the ice is passed over the tundra north of Great Slave Lake and earthward on a line of similar longitude. That ice is the result of the glaciers melting for about another 65 years. After 65 years of this warmth, the planet will experience a mini ice age and glaciers will reform above the Arctic circles most certainly. For now, though, Urantia must suffer the consequence of planetary warming for several reasons, among which we mention 1. Excessive amounts of the chemical carbon tetrachloride hiding in all the rainwater falling on the land today from the clouds saturated with this nasty chemical. Carbon tetrachloride forms when fossil fuels are burned to excess as they are on Urantia, and they will to disappear but natural causes, but the divine must contrive a way to precipitate this chemical out of the atmosphere, and reduce the amount of emissions from burning coal and oil in particular. Page 7. 2. Your sun, Monmisha, is burning too hot by at least a degree or two just short of an ultimatonic plasma. This is so dangerous it must be curbed as the sun could erupt in an atomic holocaust and destroy everything up to Jupiter as it flames away. These sun-high temperatures are creating, in York, PA, alone, drought conditions that are killing many trees in an area once so verdant the forests could shut out almost all sunlight there at one time. 3. Thermal patterns inside the planet do not allow cooling. The Earth's core is so hot it exceeds the minimum temperature for a plasma, and it is a metallic plasma running in excess of 62 million degrees on the Fahrenheit scale. 4. There are 4 other ingredients in the global warming mess experienced by Urantia right now. Of these we mention your burning of coal dust in vacuum pumps in the center of the country to generate electricity. That coal is close to lignite and is causing serious health problems downwind of the plants that use it. No one should ever burn anything approaching the quality of lignite, for it contains huge amounts of lead and sulfur and must be stopped. The rest of the world.
Here we stop with the first part, and I will continue with the second part, which is the rest of the world. And I hope you find this very informative. Now we can say that this is what's waiting for us, our children, and our children's children. But I would encourage everyone that there is no reason to panic. We must come in alignment with the fact that our life is eternal. We are passing from here into eternity and continue where we left off. Now there was a comment about the southeast coast of Canada and the west coast of United States, Washington, Oregon, and California states, all the way down to Mexico, and that they are an entirely different category. That is because those coastlines are in an imminent danger. The tectonic plates are so crumbled up, they are like sand, and eventually will wash into the Pacific Ocean. We are going to have more talk about that in another message. But life will not stop on Earth. This is not the end of the world. This is the beginning of a new era, of a new life, the kingdom of God coming to earth as it is in heaven. We must renew our minds in Jesus Christ. Those of you who are not saved must get to know him. This is the time. We have to have an eternal perspective on all things and consider what is coming a challenge, as we face many more challenges throughout eternity. And with this, I bless you, and I pray that you would see things with the eyes of the divine. It is time to return to the Lord with a whole heart. Have faith in God. Amen. Thank you for listening. God bless you, and please share this information. Bulletin 6 Part 2 coming up next.